If you caught my last video, which I'll leave linked in the description in case you missed it, but I discussed 5 teams this season in which I think are going to fall below expectations. And I mentioned in that video that I would be doing one on 5 teams that will exceed expectations. Those teams that are flying under the radar, people are out on, or just teams that some might think will be good, but aren't anything to get excited about or don't see them as a threat for this season. And while I'm going through these, I would love to hear some of your thoughts on teams that you guys think are going to exceed expectations this season in the comment section. As always, if you're new to the channel and you like this type of content, it would mean a great deal to me if you subscribed, and in return I'll be providing more NBA content like this. Now, the first team I'm going to start with, and this shouldn't come as a surprise if you've been following the channel for a while because I made an entire video on this team and why I think they're going to blow people away this year, and that's the Oklahoma City Thunder. It's probably becoming a little biased for me at this point, but I am super high on the Thunder this season. Not saying they're going to be a title contender. They may not even win a playoff series, although I do think they will make the playoffs. But when you look at most major media pundits and their power rankings, generally the Thunder are falling anywhere from 9 to 11 in the West, which I think is absurd because while yes, they're still very young, they don't have the experience to make themselves a real threat in the Western Conference, but you factor in that this team was consistently solid last season. In fact, they got better as the season wore on. When most had assumed that the Thunder were going to be one of the teams in the tank for Wemby sweepstakes, they ended up snagging the last spot in the play-in over a team like the Mavericks. They go on to win that first play-in game and then fall to the Wolves to secure the final playoff spot. So they were already showing signs that this is a team that is up and coming. With all the young talent they have, a budding superstar in gilgeous-alexander, who is now a first-team All-NBA player, was an MVP candidate last season, is young in his prime, has the ability to get even better, but also the young talents of Josh Giddey, Jalen Williams, who you would hope that both of those guys are going to continue to get better as they get older, and now they get their number 2 pick, what most people are calling a generational talent, and you add him to the mix at center, who is going to greatly improve their overall rim protection, something they were lacking last year in Chet Holmgren. I don't see how you can't say that this team is going to be significantly better, and I believe I mentioned it as one of my bold takes this year that I think the Thunder are going to finish as a top 6 team in the Western Conference. I know some might call it a stretch, but nobody also thought that the Kings were going to be a 3 seed last year. And I do think some teams are going to fall off a bit, like the Warriors, the Grizzlies, and even the Timberwolves. And I wouldn't be shocked to see the Thunder finish with the 6th seed and really take that next leap in what they're trying to build for their future. The next team that I have exceeding expectations for this upcoming season is the Detroit Pistons. Hear me out on this one because I'm sure some of you are probably thinking, how the hell would a team like the Pistons exceed expectations, a team that most people are projecting to finish as the worst team in the NBA? Well, that's kind of my point. You look at most power rankings across the 30 teams around the association and you'll always see the Detroit Pistons dead last on every list. I'm not saying they're going to be making the playoffs, they will still be a lottery team, but people counting out the Pistons as this foregone conclusion that they're going to be the worst team in the NBA next season need to rethink things. I think this team is actually going to give people more problems than you anticipate. They only won 17 games last season, they got unlucky in the draft lottery by falling to number 5, but they didn't have, in my opinion, their best player, or at least their best player with the most upside, in Cade Cunningham, for most of the year. And reports are saying he's now looking fully healthy and ready to go out of training camp. They've got Jaden Ivey, who I think is phenomenal with a lot of upside, not the most efficient player, but he's only 21, and that shot selection as well as having a strong point guard around him will help him improve in that regard. I love the selection and trade that they made on draft night for Jalen Duren, who I believe is going to be a great big in this league. They got Usar Thompson in the most recent draft, another player with great potential. They still have Bogdanovic as that strong veteran scorer and floor spacer. Again, they're not going to be good. They're still going to be a bad team, but I do think they're going to be better than people expect as this young, hungry, scrappy team that is looking to make a name for themselves. The next team I feel that is going to exceed expectations, and this one might not be as much of a surprise, but that's the Indiana Pacers. You know, after they made the trade for Halliburton at the deadline in 2022 and then making additional moves to put them in a position to really embrace a rebuild, they ended up exceeding expectations the following season, meaning last season, and were so good to the point where they messed around and almost made the playoffs until they started resting guys towards the end of the year to start losing and getting a higher lottery pick. This team has some great young talent led by up-and-coming superstar Tyrese Halliburton, a great coach in Rick Carlisle, Benedict Mathurin has been great for them, was a solid draft pick at number 6. Miles Turner still continues to get better with every passing season, even though he's been in trade talks for the better part of what seems like 3 seasons now, really having one of the best seasons of his career last year. They still have Buddy Hield at the moment anyway, although you'd have to think that he is going to be traded for somebody at this point. But if they end up holding on to him until closer to the trade deadline, he's still one of the best shooters in the league and on high volume. I still don't know if I have them making the playoffs just yet. I certainly think they'll be a play-in team, but they're absolutely going to be better than they were last year, and they're a team, because they're in a small market and not a lot of folks are talking about them, that I think will surpass the expectations that people currently have for them. Another team that I think will exceed expectations this season is actually the Portland Trail Blazers. Yes, they lost their superstar, one of the best players in their franchise's history, and that's obviously going to set them back, but man, do I like what the Blazers are doing. This is a nice, talented young core they're building, and even though I'm not the biggest fan of DeAndre Ayton, especially on a max contract, he's by far a better center than Jusuf Nurkic, especially considering their ages. And it's also possible that Ayton, in a new environment, a rebuilding team, he may actually thrive and prove all of his doubters wrong. He's still a very skilled big man. There's just always been questions about his motivation and effort on the court. But Ayton aside, they drafted who I believe to be a generational prospect in Scoot Henderson. They have Anthony Simons, Shaedon Sharpe. They also added Robert Williams in the Drew Holiday trade. Who knows what they're going to be able to get from Malcolm Brogdon if they choose to move him as well. And while I still think the Blazers are going to be towards the bottom of the West, they're still going to be a lottery team, but they're going to be better than most people think, as these young guys are hungry and playing with a chip on their shoulders, knowing that most people are counting them out as a tanking team, just simply put because they don't have Damian Lillard anymore. And then finally, and you know I had to save this one for last because people would have just clicked on to the next video if I had started out with this team, and yes, it's a little biased, I know, but that's the Chicago Bulls. For the Bulls, it's not because I think they're going to suddenly turn things around and be a contender in the East. It's not because I think they're going to be a strong playoff team, and it's not because I think they're all of a sudden going to figure out all of their other issues. No, this team still isn't going to be that good. But when you see how much people are writing off the Bulls, outlets like The Ringer, ESPN, Bleacher Report, CBS, all putting the Chicago Bulls 24th, 25th, 26th in their power rankings, 12th or 13th in the East. People are so out on the Bulls right now that you even have people believing more in teams like the Raptors, the Magic, the Jazz over them, which I guess, to be fair, the Bulls haven't really done much to earn the respect that they're wanting from the media. They haven't inspired confidence in anyone, including the fans, but in my humble opinion, they're going to be better than a lot of people think. They have the talent on the roster. It's more of a matter of extracting that talent, switching up their offense, which they've been committed to and executing in training camp, which you've also seen in preseason play. They added more efficient three-point shooters in Javon Carter and Torrey Craig, which the Bulls absolutely needed. Those guys also add defense to an already top 5 defensive team in the league. And people also forget that as bad as the Bulls were last season and were a big disappointment as a team, they lost 17 games last year by 5 points or less. So many close losses, poor execution down the stretch because of their lack of shooting and the lack of a floor general and leader on the court. Hopefully turning that around with their added three-point volume, better ball control and playmaking in the final minutes, and that will turn a lot of those losses that you saw last season into wins. Not only that, but the Bulls have one of the deeper benches in the league when you look at it from a 10-man rotation standpoint. So yes, I know I'm biased. I know I'm riding the hopium right now, but I firmly do believe that the Bulls will be a surprise this season and will blow all of those power rankings out of the water. By the way, some of the power rankings that are being put out there are so bad. I need to do a video reacting to those. ESPN in particular was especially bad. But anyway, we'll save that for another day. Let me know your thoughts on these 5 teams and what other teams you think will exceed expectations this season. As always, be sure to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.